We've got people coming in. Hello and welcome to everybody. This is about doing a little bit of chat as we get started and warmed up. But welcome to people coming through. We'll give them a couple of moments there. I'll do a little heads up as we get started that this is the third webinar we're doing under the Game Changers banner. And next week, we've got another session looking at coaching. So it's entitled Sidelined Women. And we're going to be talking to some coaching experts, both elite coaching and also grassroots coaching, to consider why we don't see more women in coaching roles and what needs to change there too. So that's next week's discussion. So another webinar free to join, and we'll be sharing more details about that too. So that's coming up on the 26th, next Wednesday, same time at 2 till 3. So welcome to people coming on board. We'll get started because we've got so much to cover in this hour or so. So as I say, this is part of the Game Changers, this webinar, a slightly new format where rather than just talking to one person, I've got the privilege of talking to a panel of experts here today around a specific topic. And today we're going to be talking about the intersections of race, faith and culture in women's sport. So clearly, many of us on this call involved in the fight for gender equality in sport, but are we doing enough to ensure that that approach is truly intersectional? And what do we feel needs to change to make sure all women feel included in sport, from participation right through to elite pathways and then into the boardroom as well too? And I do know it is a topic that can be tricky to explore sometimes, and I know that I feel uncomfortable and anxious sometimes that I might say the wrong thing or use the wrong language, and clearly I'm also conscious that it's not just about asking ethnically diverse women to be the experts in all things on inclusion. You know, we all need to do our own research here. But that said, I'm really thrilled that I can welcome this expert panel here today for today's webinar, and they've kindly agreed to help me explore this subject, to share some of their lived experiences. And also, I really want to come up with some practical examples and recommendations of how we can make women's sport more inclusive. So quick introductions for those on the panel. I've got Wafula, who's an extraordinary para-athlete. She's also an author, inspirational speaker, disability rights campaigner, and a powerful advocate for the less fortunate in society. Anne's passionate about equality and the rights of disabled people to be heard. And actually, Anne and I have already had a conversation, if you want to go back and listen to on the Game Changers, I think it's episode 74, not that long ago, but Anne was my guest there. So we did explore some of these topics on that conversation. You can find out more about Anne's history and her career path too. A fascinating listen. And then it's Shruti Saujani. I will say that again. Sorry, Shruti. Shruti Saujani, engagement lead for ED&I at the ECB, the England and Wales Cricket Board. And Shruti led on the ECB's Dream Big Desi Women project, which saw her team really focused on empowering more women in Britain from South Asian backgrounds to play cricket at all levels. And again, Shruti and I have spoken before on the Game Changers too. And finally joining us today is Garnet Mackinder, Garnet's equality lead at Sport England, who played semi-professional rugby at Exeter Chiefs and has been capped by England in rugby sevens. So welcome to all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate your taking the time to be part of this conversation. And I wonder if I can just start by asking each of you really where you feel we are today in women's sports in terms of inclusion. We've obviously started this podcast to have that conversation, but I'm interested to know where you feel we are today in terms of inclusion for women from all backgrounds. So Garnet, I don't know if you're happy to lead out there and start that with your answer.
Yes, I think for women in general, inclusion has come a long way from where it was previously, but I still think we do have a long way to go, especially when it comes to intersectionality. I think there are some great organisations out there delivering for women, but there aren't many that go, I guess, that step further for intersectional groups. For example, disabled females, and I think those women that may fall through the gaps that aren't being picked up by certain organisations aren't being picked up by these female organisations. And I think those are the women that probably will have less opportunities to participate in sport. So I think there is a gap there that I'm hoping Sport England, Fearless Women will be having those conversations over the next 12 months about how can we really do a bit more of a targeted approach. and particularly for delivery as well. There's been a lot around Muslim women, which I think is great, but how can we spread that between other groups as well? Because there's so much more than just women. I think socioeconomic status is probably huge, and personally I think that is the biggest factor for me, because if you're experiencing financial hardship, sport is a bit of a luxury, and it's probably going to be the first to go, probably going to be the first cost saving. So how can we make sport more affordable, more appealing? And yeah, I mean, I could talk about it all day, but I do think intersectionality is such an important space, and I think we need to develop the understanding in the sector to go that one step further on what we're currently doing.
Brilliant, thank you, Garnet. That's so true, isn't it? And I think it is looking at all those areas, and as you say, when there is that crossover of the different components, it can be so powerful. Shruti, what are your thoughts in terms of where we are today?
Similar to Garnet, I think we've come a long way for women as a whole in terms of sports. That intersectionality, there's still steps to be taken, and I think education's key. I think I guess everyone on this call can take the little steps of taking a step to just learn a little bit more about the intersectionalities, different protected characteristics, but also the different layers that could affect women participating in sports. So I think it's how can we educate ourselves and really make our product, our services for all, and looking at a human for all they are rather than a specific characteristics, or even just putting people in boxes. That I think we need to move away from that and look at people as a whole, which I'm sure, similar like Sport England, Fearless Women, we're doing that, and we just need to continue that.
It's just interesting, isn't it, that almost box ticking? I think sometimes that's just like in society, isn't it? Sometimes it's easy to, well, it feels like it's easier to pigeonhole people and tick those boxes. But as you say, it's looking at the whole person and how they relate. And what are your thoughts in terms of your experiences and where you feel we are today?
Shruti, you've mentioned something very important: education. Education is key to everything. And I think, to me, maybe I'll probably say education has played a big part, be it college, be it school, where sport is encouraged. When you are very young, when you sort of start going to school, it is very important and mandatory that girls are encouraged to take part in sport, because that is where it starts from. And when schools are not inclusive, then young women or young girls learn from a very early age that this is not for me. I'm not wanted here. There's no provision. So, those facilities that are made available to girls when they're young are very important, because it's like growing or planting a seed, telling a young girl who is growing that it is possible. You can go on to be a footballer, you can go on to be an athletics woman, you can do all these things. Remember those days when women were not allowed to run a full marathon? Those days, where are we now? Where women are recording, are doing incredible things when it comes to athletics. For example, we just saw the Lioness, how they did perform so well. But also another thing that I want to quickly mention is participation and spectators. When did we start to see men even stop to watch women football, for example? So women are making history, and may this continue. But there's a place where is lacking, there is a gap. And this is when we talk of intersectionality. And when we talk about colorism, when we talk about abilities, these are areas that we need to tackle, that, we are making so many steps forward as women in sport. But what about these other gaps? We need to fill those gaps.
Thank you, Anne. And you mentioned there in terms of that grassroots and sports participation, and I'd like kind of in this next few minutes to move through and address different areas as they relate to sport. And I'd like to start, if I can, on that grassroots side. I think that's so important as women first find sport, women and girls find sport. So I wonder, in terms of what that looks like from women from ethnically diverse backgrounds today. Garnet, you shared a little bit of that, but what have you seen in Sport England in terms of the Active Life survey and the statistics? Can you kind of paint a picture in terms of what grassroots participation is like at the moment?
Well, I won't throw loads of stats at you, but I mean, I think we know post-COVID participation in general has been down, and even more so for women. And we know the barriers are there. We know it's tough for us. And then if you add culturally diverse on top of that, it's just another layer, another lack of opportunity. At Sport England, we're basing a lot of our work on the Traorist report. So if you're not familiar, that's the Tackling Racism and Racial Equality in Sport report, which was released in 2021. It's on our website if you want to have a read. But what really struck me was the stories that came out of it. I feel really lucky that I have not experienced much racism in sport at all, but the report shows that I'm clearly in the minority, and that it is still rife out there, unfortunately. And I think the way the story is told is really striking. And then out of that, we've got 5 themes for action, which I can go into detail a little bit more later. But I think also before we put pen to paper, before we put investment into anything, we're at that research phase. We want to understand a little bit more. So we're at the start of a journey, doing a bit of consultation with people from protected characteristics that may have one, but then someone that may have 2 or 3, and is there a comparison? If you have more than one protected characteristic, are the barriers even more? We probably think yes, but we want to speak to people, get those stories so that we understand and reach the people that are experiencing the most financial hardship. So yeah, I mean, it is tough. I think, like, personally, my story, how I got into rugby, I think I was lucky. We didn't get offered it in school. It wasn't a sport that was on my radar at all. And it was a coach that came to our school, ran a taster session just for the girls. I absolutely loved it, and it kind of went from there. So whilst I guess the pathway was really inclusive and the door was open, if you don't know it's open, then you're not going to walk through it. So I think it's really important to get that outreach, give people those opportunities. And sport isn't for everyone, but if you give someone an opportunity and it's for them, then, you know, it changed my life, and it's a huge part of my life and always will be.
Thanks, Garnet. I did read a fantastic piece you shared. Was it on the BBC website, or it was on the Sport England website? But in terms of your kind of story and coming to find the sport too, and that experience, and I think we've seen more of that this week in terms of other stories there. Clearly rugby's in the news, but people talking more about that from that really grassroots level. Shruti, you've done so much fantastic work at cricket, clearly, and others now learning from that as you've kind of shared the learnings that you've had. But I wonder if you can just highlight what are the key challenges that have been faced by South Asian women in terms of getting them started in cricket in that initially the grassroots level.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump on the back of Garnet on this, but to as she's rightly highlighted, like, you don't know what you don't know, and them opportunities. What we found that with the communities we were engaged with, they just weren't aware that cricket could be a viable option for them to volunteer, play, or even have a career in. So it was about, how do we raise awareness that sport can give you so much, whether it's playing, whether it's making friendships, physical, mental health, the benefits of that, or even just being a part of with people like yourself and being a part of like national and local community. So awareness is huge. And I think for sports or different sports, like making sure people are aware of what you're offering, and also ensuring that what you're offering is right for them, not just a off-the-shelf product that you feel that's going to suit everyone. And that's where that intersectionality comes in, because what someone might need in Birmingham might be different to what someone in London needs, for example. So that was really key awareness. It was about making sure we took cricket to their doorsteps. So we know, like, having a safe environment, the travel distance between like leaving their home and going to a safe place was really key, because there's so many things happening outside of sport in the world that we live in as well, and safety was like a high priority. So just making sure that where they were coming, the environments were safe and they felt comfortable. Making sure that the sessions we ran, whether they were for the children or the activators that were coming through the door, they were done by people like them. So making sure that they saw themselves in the roles, but again, having females who were there, who were leading the session, was super valuable. And then it's also just around, there's a few women that we engage with in communities that had various cultural expectations or various I guess expectations from them, whether it was family or whether it was other priorities that were conflicting, and sports was always pushed to the bottom of the agenda. So how do we, one of the things that we worked on over the past couple of years is how can this be a lifestyle choice? How can this fit into everything else that's happening? And that's why really building on that bond between mothers and children, or aunties and nieces, and really bonding on that family or friendship experience was key. So it's all about finding different and unique ways to appeal to different people, basically.
Thank you. And I know we talked about that whole going into people within communities, but clearly schools, as you mentioned at the beginning, and that's such a key area of education and schools. So I'm just interested in all of your thoughts, really, in terms of the factors that impact those young women, that peer pressure to whether to get involved with what's traditionally feminine or not, the clothes they have to wear, getting changed in public periods, how any of those things are perhaps magnified for women from culturally diverse backgrounds. Clearly there are issues anyway that we know of facing. We're seeing this massive dropout of teenage years, but if those things are worse or not worse, there's more of a challenge for them in other communities too. I don't know what your thoughts are there, Anne.
So that is very, very interesting, because I'll sort of quickly share my story with you. When I started athletics, para-athletics, I developed, to me, I want to call it a very beautiful upper body, toned muscles and, shoulders. But one time I was in the gym and a man made a comment, and he didn't know whether I was female from just looking at me from, while he was standing behind. And I thought, oh, that is not so kind. And, that is not so kind. And because of that, I became so timid. I never wanted to expose my shoulders. I always covered up. Even when I was training outside on the track and, in scorching sun, I still covered up because I was like, I still want to be a woman. So to me, I feel that the language that is used around female athletes sometimes can put people off, because, for example, if you're playing rugby, you don't want sort of to go and, your peers to, or maybe your peers to start thinking, oh, goodness me, she's changing into something else, or she's starting to look different, or why is she doing rugby? This is something that is just associated with men. But we come from those backgrounds. We come from, most of our parents are from a generation where the only sport you can play as a girl is netball. The only sport that you can do as a girl is rounders, or, something like that. So you bring in all these diverse, sports, and people start to wonder, families start to wonder. And I think sometimes that's why parents are so quick or reluctant to let their young girls go and participate in certain sports. And this is also based on faith, religion. I have friends who will not play certain sport because they cannot expose certain parts of their bodies. So what do we do to encourage these athletes, and what kind of knowledge or education do we have to, to help their parents or families to understand how, their children can actually come and access sport? I think it's sort of like we have sort of to find ways where we can actually start to tolerate people, their beliefs, where they're coming from, to know that I can still come and run and still wear a headscarf, for example. I can still come and, do this, but dressed in a certain way. I can still come and, participate in sport. But if it's a time for me to pray, then I'll go in a corner and say my prayers. We need to encourage safe spaces for young women to come and play or access sport. And then maybe another thing that I could probably say is opportunity. There's a lack of opportunity when we want to start exploring people from ethnic backgrounds, or people, from protected characteristics, if I may say, Garnet, because that is the word you've used. There is a lack of opportunity. And where is this lack of opportunity? People do not know how to embrace, us from certain backgrounds, you know, because they expect if you are coming in their space, if they are going to open that door, they automatically expect that you should come and be who they want you to be. They're not allowing you to come and be your authentic self, you know, and still excel in that way. To me, you know, when I talk about opportunity, I stumbled upon parasport by accident. It's because I'd gone to the gym to lose a bit of weight after I'd become a mother. And that's when somebody said to me, oh, do you know you can participate in, you know, in disability sport? And I was like, what is that? You know, and the rest is history. I went on and I became a Paralympian. So I think we need to be creating safe spaces for people to come in, regardless of their, you know, of their color, their ethnicity, their creed, you know, their societal status. We need to do that. And when I'm talking about societal status, this is also something that we really need to be addressing, because certain sports are for certain classes. How many Black people will be doing certain sports? You know, dressage, for example, you know, the sports that cost lots of money. You know, some families will be struggling to either go and buy you a horse, for example, or put food on the table. So we need to find a little bit of, you know, of a balance where we can start to open some of these very expensive, costly sports to people from the ethnic backgrounds. Maybe that's what I can say for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got so much to move on to you there. They're all such valid points. And there was a fabulous piece, I think it was Sadia Kabeya shared today on the BBC, around being her authentic self, turning up to rugby and being able to be herself rather than needing to change herself to conform. And last week's session, we did talk about sports clothing for women. So if I can move us into that from your points, Anne, absolutely, that importance of sports clothing and how important that choice is to encourage women from all backgrounds to feel they can belong and take part in sport. So Shruti, I don't know if you're happy to pick up there in terms of the conversations. How did it work for the Dream Big initiative in terms of what women would wear when they were going to come and play cricket and get involved in cricket?
So just to build on what Anne said, it's so important. The clothing was so crucial. You look at imagery, and in most cases from the women we'd connected with, they'd only seen like the elite players, and you look at elite sportswear, it's kind of fitted and it's kind of like skin tight, and that a lot of them had fed back to us that this doesn't feel comfortable. So one of the first things we did before even Dream Big campaign was born, or the idea was there, we looked at how can we make sure that the kit was suitable for the women we were engaging. So we looked at making longer t-shirts and looser t-shirts, so a bit slightly more bigger, looser jogging bottoms. We made headscarves available, and we made longer sleeve like skins that women could wear under their t-shirts. And it wasn't just specific groups that wanted to wear skins or cover up. It was everyone, a majority of the women that we'd engage, because that's what they felt comfortable in. And we didn't get it right all the time. Like, I hold my hands up, there were some mistakes that we made along the way. Like I remember our first order, the t-shirts were really, really long and they felt like a dress, and I was like, this is wrong. But we went back because we spoke to the women, we're like, we held our hands up, we're sorry we got it wrong, and we changed. And I think that's what we've, like, as sports, we've got to be agile, we've got to be flexible and open to feedback, and also pivot, because now we have the best approach we think's right for the women we've engaged, especially South Asian women. And I just want to pick on a point Anne said about taking family on the journey. I think that's huge. I think from participation to elite, like if you look at converting sports fans into your sport, I think taking that whole family on the journey and how it benefits them as a family to partake is so essential as well.
Thank you. Garnet, what are your thoughts in terms of, I know we had some kind of lovely Zainab talking very openly about being able to wear the hijab in rugby, and it was some really positive stuff. We've seen some positive things within women's football from after the hijab ban, but then to kind of making it more accessible for girls to play too. So kind of what are your thoughts in terms of clothing generally within this, and not just within rugby? I don't want to pigeonhole you in rugby, but across
well, I think back to, I guess, my athletics days at school, and we had to wear the tiny briefs that, you know, young girls don't particularly feel comfortable in, the crop top. I think athletics has changed since then. There seem to be a few like different designs and stuff that you can wear, which is more positive. And I guess I've seen the change of rugby kit throughout the years as well. Like when I first started, it was, you know, big baggy men's kit that didn't fit properly. Whereas now it's definitely not perfect, but more and more brands it's becoming the norm to have like women's fit, women's sizes, rather than just wearing a men's small or medium or boys large, which was kind of the norm when I was growing up. So I think there's, I guess, a long way to go still, but it's getting better. And like you say, I think rugby, you can wear skins, you can wear the hijab. So I think that's pretty inclusive, but maybe it just needs to be promoted more, because people may not know that you can do that. So yeah, I'd say rugby is probably one of the, I guess it's less of an issue, but still stuff to work on.
And it's tricky, isn't it? I was just thinking about that whole using the example and showing and talking about what's needed for that community. But if you haven't got women and men from that community within your sport anyway, it is hard for those people in the decision-making positions. And we talk a bit about that with men, don't we? Who should be making a decision about whether we wear white shorts, etc.? Is it men? Well, actually, it should be people that are going through menstruation. You know, it was like having women in those roles because that affects them. And I feel it's the same in terms of culturally diverse communities. I can't comment on what a girl might need or want. I can ask the questions, but I don't know. I haven't had that lived experience myself, so I'm not sure what the answer is or what you would suggest there in terms of where people can go to find out whatever they're doing within their clubs or federations and how they're doing it correctly. Where, I guess, we come to Sport England and hope that you might have some of the answers, but where else do people go to find that out?
Yeah, well, I mean, Sport England probably wouldn't have the answers, and that's why we do like the consultation with people. But I think it is really important to not just expect people to share their experiences or answer questions for free. There needs to be some kind of incentive. They're giving up their time, you know, you need to give them something back. But yeah, I mean, we work with a number of different partners who we normally lean on, because they're the ones that are, you know, out in those communities, know those people. We don't just want to be out of the blue and like say, can you answer these questions? Hopefully we can speak to someone that already has those relationships. So yeah, they're kind of more likely to be open and honest as well.
Thank you. And I do think, you know, I'm going to move on to talk a little bit more in terms of the pipeline of moving into elite sport and so on. But I know in terms of hair and Afro hair, we're talking about clothing, but in terms of, I guess that's been more highlighted recently, hasn't it? Alice Deering spoken really open about it. I know Simi Pam done some amazing posts around dealing with Afro hair as a female athlete too. So people talking about it can be so powerful, as you say, Garnet. It shouldn't be us always expecting it to come from that community, but actually people sharing their experiences can be what opens our minds to things that we would never otherwise have thought about too. But sometimes it takes for someone to be quite brave to publicly have that conversation too, doesn't it? So we kind of commend them for doing so, and hopefully we can amplify those stories too. Sorry, Garnet, you whipped yourself off of mute there.
I know, I was just going to agree with you really, and I think women's rugby has some great voices. You know, Simi Pam, as you mentioned, Shauna Brown, they're always highlighting that. So I think the more sports that can get those role models talking, showing representation, the better.
Excellent, yeah, and it's making them feel safe to do so, isn't it? And I know, as I mentioned, Shauna as well. Shauna was also an amazing BBC piece that I saw her share. Oh, her thing was, if you can't see it, go and be it yourself, almost like giving people the confidence to kind of make that pathway. I'd like to move on, if I can, to talk a little bit more about that pathway to elite sport. And I know there's been lots of talk over the summer, amazing lionesses at the Euros, but that lack of diversity that we saw within the team, and I absolutely understand the FA are doing lots to address this, and I'm very lucky. I'm speaking to Rachel Pavlo at the end of the week for the Game Changers, and so I've been researching and seeing all that they're doing. They are doing a lot. However, it's fairly similar if you looked at the cricket team, you know, in terms of the representation of England cricket teams, of the rugby home nation squads in New Zealand at the moment. I think there's probably 3-4 women from African or Caribbean backgrounds in the England squad at the moment, but the men's would be much higher. So why do you think that is at the moment? Why do we see that? And the same with men's football. You know, we'll see a kind of really high representation, especially of black men. but we don't see that in terms of the women. So why do you, any thoughts from your own experiences as to why that is at the moment? And then I'm going to move on to what we might do to improve it, but any thoughts at all there?
I think, to me, maybe what I would probably say is we really need to have enough role models, you know, and you know, when we talk about role models, is it's a way of I don't want to use the word enticing, but it's a way of letting the young ones really aspire to be like so and so, you know. I want to be Garnet, you know, I want to play rugby, I want to play cricket, you know, I want to be like so and so. So having a national team of a football, you know, football women, and not even having one Black person playing even for only 10 or 15 minutes. I think that showed that we still have a long way to go in terms of representation, you know. When I was growing up, I believed I could not be somebody that I've not seen. And, you know, as a Black woman, when I did not see disabled people doing certain things, I believed, well, I cannot be so and so because she doesn't have a disability, or she's not Black. You know, I'm Black. I want somebody who looks like me doing these things. And I think, to me, we have a lot of work that we need to do. I know organizations like to tick boxes and say, we've done this, we have this quota, we've represented this. But I think it's high time that we took that paper and maybe rewrote it. You know, let's rewrite history where we don't just want to pat ourselves on the back because of how many Black people we've put on a team. I think we can do more than that, you know, because we want sport to be something that is dynamic, not static. We shouldn't be stuck in the olden days where it's only a certain color of people who are being represented. I think we are failing the young generation by doing that. And that's why I feel that we can do more in this area. Representation is key. And, you know, as a Black woman, what I'll probably say is we want allies. We want everybody to be an ally. And when I say, you know, we want everybody to be an ally, it is not about, you know, asking you to come and know everything about being Black or being disabled or being female. No, I just want everybody to acknowledge that we need to try and find equal and fair representation.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing as well, isn't it, about the having somebody on a squad, and it could be a Black woman or a South Asian woman, or in terms of the lionesses, and that's good. But actually, it's about everything that comes before, isn't it? It's the pipeline, it's the access to playing, because it isn't even about one or two players. It's about giving all girls that kind of chance through schools, through accessibility, coaching, and so on. Shruti, did you want to jump in there?
You just touched on it, Sue. I think it's the whole holistic approach across every moment that sorry, I've just lost tongue tie there. An individual connects with sports. So whether it's watching on TV, whether it's volunteering, whether it's playing, they need to see that representation at all levels. So definitely we look at that elite game, but it's so important to look at that recreational game. Who are the role models as well? So likely if you speak to people, loads of them say their first coach or their first mentor they can remember, and it's how do you really amplify that, the local heroes who've done so much to show that they can progress across the pathway. And I think it's so important, and we saw that in Dream Big, because what we did was we made it a priority that these 2,000 women were going to be the role models of that future generation and inspire young girls to pick up a bat and ball. And it's just been so beneficial for us to have that approach.
And do you see that change come in, Shruti? So in terms of the work that's been done, I know it's kind of quick, it's in the last few years or so, but are you beginning to feel that in the next few years we could have a range of women to choose in the England team that you know don't all look as they do at the moment? Is that we're on the pathway to that? Yeah,
100% we're on the pathway. Recent data that we've has seen an increase in ethnically diverse girls on the county age group pathway, which is amazing, which has been a 4% increase from last year. We've also had different initiatives, so like where we've got county talent champions who go out and see where we can see this talent. So it's not just in your clubs. We're looking at different diversification routes, how talent can come in at every age group. So again, that's another opportunity. Often you'll see scouts or talent champions go in certain clubs or certain locations to identify talent, but how can you go where the talent is? So we know a lot of ethnically diverse audiences are in certain cities or in inner cities or urban areas. So how can you, when you're talent scouting, go to them like where they play? And that's what we've started to do through our initiatives. And then, as Anne's touched on, role models, we've put a lot of focus behind like making sure that coaching pathway has the support through various bursaries and pathways, because we know the power a coach could have as well.
And absolutely move on, not move on really, but just in terms of picking up on the coaching side, because Garnet, I haven't been stalking you this week, but I did read the article a really interesting article, I guess about you growing up as a predominantly kind of white area in Devon and playing rugby there. But it was a really interesting observation you made around the positions that people play, that even when we see Black men and women playing rugby, it tends not to be in that decision-making position of scrum half. I thought that's fascinating. So a bit of it is about the perception of coaches also, isn't it? Is once you get into the game, where does the coach then put you, the teachers, where do they encourage you to play? So I hadn't really thought about that. So I thought it was a really interesting observation. I don't know if you want to kind of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like there is that stereotype around Black people. They're quick, they're strong, and if you look at the game, they tend to either be like on the wing because they're quick, or props because they're really strong. If you look at, you know, South Africa and England as well. But yeah, so I just think it's maybe just when they join the game, automatically being kind of pushed into those positions rather than having it open as a whole. Let's try every position. And see where you end up, because yeah, there definitely isn't that representation across the men's or the women's game at the moment, and it's hard to pinpoint why exactly. But yeah, I thought interesting observation, as you said, and something I think probably need to think about when people, boys, girls, first join. Let's not try and shoehorn them into where we think they should play, but yeah, give them a go at everything. And I agree with sports as well. Like, if I was a parent, I wouldn't want to shoehorn my child into one sport. I'd want them to try and give everything a go and then make their own choice. Because I was, I think, pushed into athletics probably because there are role models. There are more likely to be people that look like me. But you know, it would have been nice to give everything a go rather than just being kind of pushed towards that sport straight away.
Yeah, thank you. And Shruti, what do you feel in terms of South Asian communities? Are they pushing to a particular sport, or is it not sport? You know, not playing sport that's the option, really?
I think cricket plays a huge part. We know for cricket there's a huge following from South Asian communities. I also think it's, if they don't see themselves in having a career and opportunity and they just see themselves as fans, I think that's the challenge and that's the narrative we need to change. That there is a place regardless of how you want to be involved. So working on the South Asian Action Plan has been a huge benefit for us to engage at every level. And I think it's to my earlier point around lifestyle, I think we need to show the opportunities in sports. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with I guess that Gen Z and the millennials that are coming through who are thinking about careers in sports or just connecting in sports. Currently, there's a perception that if you want to be in sports, it's you either play at a really high level or you coach. There isn't anything else that they feel they can get involved in, and it's how can we as a collective change that narrative? Because once you change, as Anne's mentioned around representation, once you change workforce, once you create those role models, you'll attract that broader audience, and that's super important.
No, absolutely. And that's a lot of the work. I'll have it for the collective here, but for the Women's Sport Collective, that's absolutely one of our ambitions, is to kind of change the access to people working within the whole of sport itself, because I do feel that's the piece that's going to filter down and have that impact too, isn't it? We talked a little bit about role models and some of those fantastic things we've been seeing even recently, but I wonder how much the role of media and the brands can play in this space too. And I say seeing some fantastic work that Nike have done in terms of clothing, and I saw a fantastic video about the Nike Pro hijab and sharing that with girls, but also I know Dove have had an amazing Real Beauty campaign recently talking about women's hair and I guess how you perceive yourself too. So how much do you feel brands and what brands do can help within this space to drive change? So I didn't really point that at anybody really, did I? Garnet, well, I'll come to you first, Garnet.
You know, I think brands, I mean, brands can do a lot. You know, brands can do a lot because that is what the young people are looking, you know, are looking up to, for example. You know, so when we're talking about brands, we are talking about what is fashionable, what is everyone wearing, what is everybody talking about, you know, and I feel that is where they actually have an opportunity to bring everyone in. You know, it's sort of like to have almost everyone represented. Nike have done you know, a good example, or you know, what the job that Nike has done is a very, very good example that it is achievable, it is possible to use people from, you know, people from different backgrounds and sort of like encourage everybody to, you know, to say that you can do this, you can still wear this and still be your authentic person. You know, I'm yet to see many brands come up and sort of like use disabled people. You know, I've always said that disability is something that is an add-on, you know, when it comes to you know, to many things. And I would really like to see brands, you know, especially, you know, the sporting brands, use more disabled people. We have household names now. Why can this brand sort of say, we are going to use some of these household names? And if they cannot use the household names, it's sort of like just use any person with a disability to show the young ones, especially, you know, those at grassroots level, you know, to say to them that you can actually be like so and so. You know, you can wear this and still be cool. You know, you can have you know, a turban and still play football. You know, come on, it is possible, because brands make a lot of money and we want them to do more. We want them to really come up and sort of like show that integration and inclusion.
That's a fabulous point. And I guess onto the media also, and I know Shruti and I were talking beforehand about Sky's fantastic work they're doing at the moment around Diwali and all that's coming up in the next week or so, and the work they've been doing talking and exploring. The BBC, I've already mentioned a couple of features that I've seen even in this last week in terms of talking to women from different backgrounds around their experience of sport. So how important do you think the media are? Could they be doing more in this space, or do you feel there's plenty being done? Shruti, I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I definitely think they could be doing more, and I think it's, again, like, how do you reach the target audience you're really after? So definitely you've got the big media titles like BBC, Sky, etc., but you've also got the local media titles which actually really reach the heart of the audiences that different sports are after. And I think it's same with brands, like you've got your big brands who've got the money awareness, but then also your local brands who really are authentic and reaching that communities or groups that we're after. And I think it's, how do you leverage them? And ultimately what sits below that is you've got to build the trust with your consumer, your end user, and then you've got to be authentic, because it's seen a mile off if it's tokenism or if it's just there because, like, for example, if Diwali's around the corner and you're just going to post about it, but if it just comes out of the blue and none of your previous posts or posts go forward have referred to anything outside of specific topics, then you're going to get caught out very quickly. So I think it's about being authentic, as well as the big brands, the local brands. I think we, as a sport and as an industry, I think definitely we could leverage more. I think we can use the localized brands to amplify more stories locally, and specifically amongst target audiences as well. So just my thought. Oh, you're on mute, Sue.
I'm on mute. I did it myself. I said it's such a good point, and I think someone's mentioned here is, are we kind of talking too much around skin color and race? Actually, that, I guess that is this webinar, but actually it's about intersectionality generally, and we see that a lot with Pride and LGBTQ, and suddenly everyone jumps on for that month to share brands and products because it feels like it's the right thing to do, rather than having embraced it throughout the whole of the year and their calendar. And I think they're definitely, but as you say, I think the world's changing and people are, the brands are seen for that now in a way perhaps they weren't in the past. I'd like to move, if I can, just talk around women on boards and in decision-making positions too, because I feel we've alluded to that a couple of times, haven't we? But almost getting women from different backgrounds across sport in those positions will then have impact in the future. And I know the Code of Sports Governance obviously had very clear gender targets initially, the first code, but there was nothing set around ethnicity and culture in terms of targets, and there's no targets today still too. So I guess, Anne, I might come to you first on this, because I know that it's a bit of not your specialist subject, but you have kind of sat on boards and you've experienced that. I think at the time you were the only woman of colour on any sport board for a while. I know that's changed now, but what do you think's prevented that in the past? And you've alluded to the fact that, you know, a sport like athletics, it's almost like that reverse pyramid, and we've got so many black athletes participating, but it doesn't progress through for men or for women. So what are your thoughts now, and are things better than they have been?
I think maybe one problem that has sort of been a challenge really is empowerment. I think women of color have not been empowered to take up these positions. And the interesting thing is, even if a board opened up and we did not have enough women to take up these roles or these positions, it would be pointless, just because they would not sort of like feel that they belong.
What do you mean, Anne? What do you mean by empowered there? I don't mean to cut across you, but in terms of women haven't been empowered, how would you explain that more?
What I'm trying to say is women of color or women from ethnic backgrounds haven't been empowered to sit on the boards. It's because, you know, for you to sit on a board, you need that door to open for you. But these doors have constantly shut for so many years. The doors have been shut. And it doesn't matter what you're doing on the outside, you need to have your foot in the door, you know, to move in. And for you to be able to do that, you need that empowerment. And I think, you know, the sad thing is, to be honest, when you speak to many women, you know, from my background, for example, they'll say, you know, some of them will say to you, they've applied to sit on boards and they haven't been given that opportunity. While some will say to you, what is the point of me trying, because I know that door will not be opened. And that's what I'm saying, empowerment. And because of that empowerment, you sort of stop trying. For example, you stop trying because it's like you've been knocking on a door or a window for so many years. Nobody even seems to peep, you know, just to open for you to peep and see what is happening. And that has made boards to really lack on so many things, because I believe a diverse and an inclusive board makes the best decisions, because almost everyone's voice is represented there, you know. So we need to empower many women of color to come and take up these positions. And it's not that they are not capable, they are capable. You know, they are very capable. You know, so when I'm talking about empowerment, it doesn't mean that they're not capable. They are very capable. They need the doors to be opened for them.
Yeah, it's about the ecosystem, the changing the system itself. And Garnet, I know you've been involved, I guess, with your Sport England hat on in terms of what the work that they're doing with Perrett Laver and others to kind of a bit to Anne's point of get women board ready, but also to talk about the structure. So people are looking more for people from different backgrounds to come onto boards. And you sit on the RFU's council too. So what's that experience been like for you, as you know, not similar to the other people, especially on something like the RFU's council?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it was quite nerve-wracking to begin with. So council's up to, I think, around 70 people now. So it's a big group. I think now there are 4 Black people and probably less than 10 women, I would say. So when you come in, it is quite intimidating. It is a white male-dominated group, but you know, they were all very welcoming and friendly, and ultimately we were all there because we want to make rugby a better game. So I think most of them are really open to change and wanting to hear fresh perspectives, which has been really positive. And I'm on a few subcommittees, which I feel like I've really been able to, you know, influence. But I think with any organisation that big, that many moving parts, things don't change overnight. That's why Sport England has a 10-year strategy. I think RFU is similar. You know, these things aren't going to happen overnight, but we'll continue working on them, and hopefully we'll get there eventually. But yeah, the appetite is there. It's really exciting. And I think in the sector, the same, like there are organisations that Parent Labour are working with, I think up to like 150, that, you know, they recognise that they want to diversify their boards. They want that diversity of thought, and it's not just a tick box, not tokenism, but they really see the benefit in it. So yeah, it's, I guess, slow-ish progress, but we're getting there.
And any advice you'd share, Garnet, in terms of your experience of the coming to something? I feel that must be hugely intimidating, coming onto a board that is so established, and you know, and it's kind of white men, but older white men that have been around for a long time in the game, in the men's game too. So is there anything looking back that you feel you did well, that you would advise others to do going on to that? Because I think it's as Anne said, it's the looking at the system, it's getting women into those positions, but it's not enough just to have you sat at the table, it's how you are then able to contribute and have impact, which clearly you can do. But anything that you'd share?
I think, well, there were 4 of us that were co-opted on at the same time, all very different lived experiences, but we kind of stuck together, had our own little subgroup of, I guess, a safe space that you can chat about. They also assigned us a mentor as well, which I think was useful, having that, I guess, more senior person that you can run things past. But I think just being confident but coming across in the right way. I think they said they chose, I guess, us 4 because we're not going to come in and rock the boat so much that they're going to want to kick us off, but we're happy to speak up. And I think sharing my lived experience, even just as a female, because a lot of them were like, oh yeah, rugby's a really inclusive game, it's open to everyone. And I'm like, hang on, maybe for you, but this is my experience. I never would have even picked up a rugby ball if someone hadn't come and, you know, shown me all the benefits, done that extra outreach. And, you know, it gets that brain ticking, and they're like, oh yeah, I never really thought of it that way. So yeah, I guess being confident, but going about it in the right, I guess, respectful way, and having that safe space, that network inside, but also outside, being able to talk to people at Sport England as well about what I'm up to. So it's been a great experience so far. I'm really enjoying it.
That's good. At least you didn't say it's been awful and what have you. You wouldn't want to say that. You're still there, which is good. And Shruti, cricket's obviously traditionally been a very white male sport, and that's reflected on the boards and the leadership teams of our counties and federations and so on. So why is it important, do you think, that changes, and how is it changing?
It's so important that cricket's workforce reflect the communities that we want to attract and work with, because that is the way forward. And as Garnet's already mentioned, we are working with Parent Labour and SRI just to look at that, how we transition that board focus. And we've been on a journey, and over the past 12 months that's definitely been accelerated, how we move forward. And we had 60 new directors who were brought in at that board level, and we took them out, we did a Q&A, and we brought them to the Royal Cup final on 17th September. And what was great to see, that 40% of them were female and 35% were diverse. And we know there's that change at that board level. We know that will now trickle down into workforce and how the makeup of the county boards, etc., will be. But it is a journey. We're still on that journey, but the progress that we're making is going in the right direction, which is super important.
And are you finding people putting themselves forward for those positions? How are you finding, because that's often the challenge, isn't it, also, is to access, so as Anne said, both to give the people the confidence to put themselves forward, but to go and find them to come forward too.
So I know, because we've been working with Parent Labour and the SRI, different recruitment agencies, we have seen it's that education of what the role entails and understanding that they can do it. So to Anne's point, like just giving them the confidence and making sure that they know they can do it, but it's just showing them the cricket world and what the expectation is. So there's been a lot of, again, go back to that point of education, is that they can do it, there is a place for them, and they will be heard. So it's how do we've really worked on the cultures and the environments that they're coming into, so they do feel welcome, they do feel they've got a voice at the table, and they do feel that they're heard. And as Garnet's already mentioned as well, like the change won't happen overnight, the change is going to take some time, but as they can see themselves reflected, they can connect up and down the country, they can have their own networks of support that they need, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that as they've entered, they continue to enjoy that journey that they're going to be on with us.
And are we doing much across sports? So is there that that link up and that connection across the sports in terms of attracting different communities, do you feel?
I think there's definitely like conversations that I've been a part of and conversations that I've been involved. There's been lots of sports who are proactively looking at different ways. So whether it's different ways to market where they could promote positions, not just board level, but other positions, different ways of like doing their recruitment process and even just understanding. So I know sports are looking to do things differently and having the conversation. I think that's the first step. Like being brave and having a conversation is a big step in the right direction, because no one wakes up in the morning to do a bad job. No one wakes up in the morning to single someone out. It's all about the education. But the biggest thing we've found is people are being more brave to have that conversation. I think that should definitely continue.
That's such an important point there, isn't it? I guess that almost circles back to where we started, of the wanting to do something but worried about getting it wrong, speaking wrongly, saying the wrong thing. And I think it is, someone mentioned earlier, almost like not wanting too much, we use too much that language of safe space and kind of all those phrases that almost don't become authentic because we keep using them. But I do think that's such a key point, isn't it, is that people feel they can make mistakes, they can try and make mistakes, but being in a forgiving environment where people won't get blamed for saying the wrong thing. And I think in the past, perhaps that has been an issue, but it's almost like being forgiving of people and helping to educate too. So as we close, it'd be really interesting to know, as a sort of a roundup, if there was a piece of advice or anything you'd like to share for people listening of how we can do this better. And I realise we've only had an hour and we've done sort of grassroots, elite pathways through to board level too. But in terms of ensuring, as we kind of fight for gender equality across sport, that we are inclusive, is there anything you'd like to share in terms of advice of what people might do to keep improving and moving in the right direction? I'm happy for any of you to take yourself off mute and go first there. I won't pick on anybody.
I'll go. So I guess be brave to have the conversation and don't be afraid of getting it wrong. I think what underpins that is it's okay to be vulnerable and make mistakes. And I think if you're authentic, people will see that. So have a conversation. There's many people in the conference today. I think they all have a role to play. Like if every single person on this conference day goes away and starts a conversation on what they can do or their role in making sport a gender balance, we will start seeing that change and that ripple effect.
Fabulous. Thank you, Shruti. Garnet or Anne, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think that we can collaborate better within the sector. I think there's so many great organisations out there doing awesome work with specific audiences, but I think we need to share learning and empower each other, because ultimately everyone loves sport, physical activity. That's why we're working on it. But how can you share that, oh, this worked, why don't you give it a go in this sport? This didn't work, let's avoid that next time. I think it's probably something for Sport England to try and bring organisations together and just, I think talk a lot more, because there's some great work going on out there, but I don't think we share it enough.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. I do often think it's almost pockets of brilliance that aren't shared, and people reinventing the wheel, go and try and do the same thing again and actually realizing it's already been done well, or someone's already tried that elsewhere. So I definitely feel, whether that's across larger federations, but locally within sports and clubs too. And Anne, I don't know if you've got a thought you'd like to leave us with in terms of what you'd like to see people doing better.
Yeah, I'm sort of like echo what Garnet and Shruti have said, but maybe I'll say that I want sporting boards, sporting organizations to do more. I would really urge them to invest, actually, to invest more energy, their time and resources, and make diverse appointments, not just because they've been forced to meet or hit a target, but because it is something that is going to be a positive impact, not just on their business, but also, on the people they serve. So let them not do it as a ticker box exercise because it's a governance code that they need to, to meet. I want them to do more.
Fantastic. Well, there's a fabulous way to finish on that statement, isn't it? We want them all to do more. Thank you so much to Shruti, Garnet and Anne for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you to everybody. And I know there's been some conversations and debate in the Q&A too, but really appreciate your time, and hopefully see people again next week when we're talking women's coaching. But thank you so much to you all.
Thanks for having us.